guess I should do the intro. I want to welcome Malachi back. I think is this your fourth time?
I believe so.
I'm going to have to get you like a premium membership card or I have to get you a beer coupon or something if you like beer. So, yeah, do you ever, I know we're going to digress for a minute. Do you ever have any of the Russian River stuff like Pliny the Elder?
Yeah, fantastic.
Th-
Yeah, I
They
mean,
have
so
that, they have some of that here on the East Coast. So I do this brewery trip, then we'll start poetry. So I went to this one brewery with our group because they had Pliny the Elder. They had like a keg of Pliny the Elder. So I got there and my tongue was like on the floor. And I go, I'm going to have a Pliny the Elder. They go, well, we opened the keg on Saturday and it was gone in 4 hours.
oh, wow.
Yeah, I was like so bummed out. I'm like, I'm going to rush into traffic now. You're killing me. Where's Pliny? Pliny, Vesuvius, where are you, brother? Um, so let me do this. I usually Rosemary does this, but I will. A second. So I want to welcome Malachi Black back to our show. He is the author of Indirect Light, forthcoming from Four Way Books in 2024, and Storm Towards Morning, Copper Canyon Press 2014, a finalist for the Poetry Society of America's Norma Farber First Book Award, and a selection for the PSA's New American Poet Series, chosen by Ilya Kaminsky. Black's poems have appeared in the American Poetry Review, The Believer, Los Angeles Review of Books, the Parish Review, Plowshares, Poetry, among other journals, and in a number of anthologies, including Before the Door of God, an anthology of devotional poetry. Uh, Malachi, we only have like an hour for the show. If I keep reading, we're only going to have 10 minutes for poetry. Only kidding.
Yeah, no,
Um, no, you teach at the University of San Diego and you live in California. So, no, thanks again for for uh, for reading with us. I always find your readings very intriguing. I went through you know the I went through your first one again over the weekend. But no, I think you bring you also bring sometimes some other poets in, for a different perspective. So, I just really like it. Well, I think every poet has a point of view, but I think part of it is sometimes you come from a different place. So I really appreciate that.
no, thank you,
Um,
John. It's an enormous pleasure to be here. And I was thinking that the way we could spend our time this afternoon, I might read one of my own poems, but I was thinking similarly about featuring work by others and trying to organize it in a way that reflects directly back onto this segment's theme,
yeah,
these sparks in the dark. It's an interesting formulation, and I was considering the multiple ways it can be understood. I was just speaking to a group of students yesterday about one of the things I love most about accomplished literature and accomplished poetry in particular is that we could analogize it to scientific theory. The most important scientific theories, at least according to what I understand about the nature of the scientific method and the modes by which scientific theory is evaluated, are those which succeed in accounting for the highest quantity of data. So you have
yeah,
this kind of elegant, simple theory, and then you've got this sort of pyramidal shape beneath
yeah,
which you have this sort of all the information. But a poem works it inverts that pyramid, and so really accomplished text has the capacity to sustain and support a number of simultaneous readings. And the more you can kind of squeeze in there based
yeah,
on the poem itself, the richer, more resonant, and more rewarding it is. And the more it changes with you as you move along. There's an element of multiplicity in the thematic for this particular season of the series. And I was trying to consider how I would fit myself into that and how I might want to showcase what I understand about the nature of that theme. And I finally began to think that what I wanted to discuss was the relationship not just between illumination and darkness, which it seems
yeah,
sparks in the dark foregrounds, but also between grief and relief, or we might say some measure of insight. But ultimately, what I'm discussing is something structural, and I think that is what we often describe as a dialectical relationship, meaning two poles across which voices move. That's literally what dialectic means. It's talking across, speaking across. And so I wanted to start with a poem by Ross Gay, who exemplifies in my mind, especially in the contemporary moment, but even more generally, a poet of profound magnanimity in the Whitmanian mode of rich generosity, but who establishes in this poem entitled Thank You, a relationship between strain, that is to say, between the darkness and the spark, and establishes the core pivot that I think is at the crux of the lyric movement from one position to another. We often describe that in the sonnet as a volta or a turn or a pivot, but all lyric poems establish a relationship between two poles of being and dramatize the movement from one and the turning toward the other. I think this does that well, and it does it out of a sense of grief or darkness and toward a moment of light. This is Thank You by Ross Gay. If you find yourself half naked and barefoot in the frosty grass, hearing again the earth's great sonorous moan that says, you are the air of the now and gone, that says, all you love will turn to dust and will meet you there. Do not raise your fist. Do not raise your small voice against it, and do not take cover. Instead, curl your toes into the grass, watch the cloud ascending from your lips, walk through the garden's dormant splendor, say only, thank you, thank you. I love that text, and I love its rich success in presenting a circumstance or situation to which we can all certainly relate, a matter of being aggrieved in our terrestrial form, in the shape of body, the anxiety of disappearance and loss, but a turning toward a profound gratitude for the opportunity to have even that feeling, if not something more fully and deeply connected. And so I was thinking after I read that poem, well, what is it about poems that enable them to provide us with sparks in the dark? It's not just that they are opportunities for understanding, but there's something in the otherness of reading itself. Something about I had a rough day recently, just small incidental things, and I found myself engaged in an act of what I might call self-soothing, but John, there's something about reading a poem that has a profoundly different effect. I finished that text by Ross Gay, and I feel uplifted in a completely differentiated way from what happens when I tell myself it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's something grounded, yes, in aesthetic experience, but maybe also in the authority of an exterior voice. And I was reminded of a poem, maybe less magnificent than Gay's, by a Polish poet, Adam Zagiewski. I don't know how many of I'm sure many people are well familiar with him. This is a text entitled, In the Beauty Created by Others. Only in the beauty created by others is there consolation, in the music of others and in others' poems. Only others save us, even though solitude tastes like opium. The others are not hell if you see them early with their foreheads pure, cleansed by dreams. That is why I wonder what word should be used, he or you. Every he is a betrayal of a certain you, but in return, someone else's poem offers the fidelity of a sober dialogue. Maybe that's different from a trip to Pliny the Elder. But
let me just jump on the Ross Gay thing first. What I liked about that is you're kind of outside, and then all of a sudden, it's like these instructions are coming to you to curl your toes, lay on the ground, don't resist. And it's like all of a sudden, it's like, so I'm just trying to imagine, like, we're kind of babysitting our neighbor's dog, and I took the dog out this morning. I was like 23 or something, and I'm like, I'm pretty fully clothed. I'm not going out in my underwear or something, but not laying on the ground. But I just like sometimes how a poem instructions come from somewhere about to kind of stop what you're doing and just be in the moment. That's what I like about that poem. It's like, you're outside and you're cold. Wait, no, forget about all that stuff. Just just enjoy the experience. So, yeah.
And there's an interesting irony too in it, I think, in as much as it's suggesting that a reader not raise their small voice against this force of cold, this force of darkness, this force of disappearance. But of course, the poem is doing exactly that in its own quiet way, and it's providing us with a voice whose content is thank you. It gives us the mechanism to express our gratitude by providing us with the voice that in that moment we might lack. But I agree, it's a complete embrace of the embodied predicament, and it's full of tremendous generosity, and in that way provides a spark in the dark experience to embrace the experience, but also to express our appreciation for it, is to upend the nature of our own suffering and perceive that as the expression of the opportunity to live, which indeed it is.
Well, the instructions are almost like, hey, it's going to be okay. Just go with the flow. You're good. You're good.
Yeah, yeah. I would agree. I mean, what can you do against the force of
Yeah.
cold or the force of annihilation? You can only,
Yeah.
you can only
Curl up your toes and then stand up and get going. Yeah.
yeah. Well, maybe the Zagievsky was more of just a kind of touchstone and an interesting element in thinking about how much the text itself serves as a spark in our experience of darkness. It's not my favorite poem, but it does exemplify something unusual, which is the authority of an external voice. And that's one of the things that poems provide us, of course. They can be forms of consolation, but there's something about the exteriority of text as it enters into our experience that has an unusual strength, different, as I say, from speaking to ourselves in our own voices. We become possessed in a way, and strengthened as a result of that possession. This is a text. I just think this is a blast, really beautiful in many ways. This is a text entitled "Sleeping with the Dictionary" by Harriet Mullen. And
Sleeping with the Dictionary.
yeah, Sleeping with the Dictionary. I think what this does, when I think about why it might be that a poem, external as it is from us, can contain such authority, one way we think about it, I imagine, is that the poem is an opportunity for the poet themselves, as it were. I don't want to be inclusive, but not ungrammatical exactly. A poet, him or her themselves, to engage in an act of self-transcendence. And this poem, Sleeping with the Dictionary, it's a prose poem, so it might be a little long. It's appropriately verbose. It is, after all, about reading a dictionary. It seems to exemplify what mode of engagement with language a poet can achieve through the act of writing, a kind of self-disappearance or transcendent event, where writing itself is the production of sparks and the poem becomes the record of that transcendence. It's a document that survives a real-time event.
Yep.
This is Sleeping with the Dictionary. I beg to dicker with my silver-tongued companion, whose lips are ready to read my shining gloss. A versatile partner, conversant and well-versed in the verbal art, the dictionary is not averse to the solitary habits of the curiously wide-awake reader. In the dark night's insomnia, the book is a stimulating sedative, awakening my tired imagination to the hypnagogic trance of language. Retiring to the canopy of the bedroom, turning on the bedside light, taking the big dictionary to bed, clutching the unabridged bulk, heavy with the weight of all the meanings between these covers, smoothing the thin sheets, thick with accented syllables. All are exercises in the conscious regimen of dreamers who toss words on their tongues while turning illuminated pages. To go through all these motions and procedures, groping in the dark for an alluring word, is the poet's nocturnal mission. Aroused by myriad possibilities, we try out the most perverse positions in the practice of our nightly act, the penetration of the denotative body of the work. Any exit from the logic of language might be an entry in a symptomatic dictionary. The alphabetical order of this ample block of knowledge might render a dense lexicon of lucid hallucinations. Beside the bed, a pad lies open to record the meandering of migratory words. In the rapid eye movement of the poet's night vision, this dictum can be decoded like the secret acrostic of a lover's name.
Woo.
It's a magnificent text, and it seems to me, in its playfulness and its self-knowledge about the highly erotic subtext of the
Yeah.
poem, it nevertheless succeeds in dramatizing the migration of a word from one context to another, the magic of perceiving suddenly a new opportunity, maybe a chance, as in the Ross Gay poem, to say thank you rather than damn, I'm freezing to death. This moment of, I wouldn't even call it insight, but kind of revelation in the work of engagement with the very medium of language that provides that spark. And in some way, it lingers in the substance of language, that spark itself. And a poet is like a surfer, forgive me, I'm in Southern California, who harnesses the natural force of language and rides it toward the glimmering terminus, which is, again, that spark at the end of our dark journey.
Yeah, what I
Here.
like about that one is yeah, there is kind of a, romanticism with the dictionary. It's your partner. Yeah, there's a it's your muse. I don't know. I found it was almost like all this orchestration had to come to the bed, and then all these like magical things kind of emerge from the pages or the thinking about the pages. And yeah.
Yeah, and it provides a tremendous solace, I think. I love this idea of these words provide a secret acrostic comparable to that on a lover's name. It is
Yeah.
true that the names of the people we love have some inherent magic in them. There's something almost mythologically resonant in these names, and they embody so much more than a designation. They contain in themselves what seems to be a meaning that could be decoded like, seance or Kabbalah or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you kind of
Yeah.
remember the experience of first falling in love as a young man, and just even seeing those letters written out, there was a charm in them. There was something
Yeah.
something deeper than what they were, and that seems to me part of the relationship that the poet maintains with the text that engenders that spark, maybe initially kind of transmission of just deep adoring love for the words in their inky arbitrariness, since of course it is a totally constructed system, but it also, I think, dramatizes the writing process, and
Yeah, I was
shows
going to
us.
say, just every poet has their own process. I mean, in prior seasons, we always ask people, how did it work for you and things like that. Yeah, it's interesting that the sleeping with the dictionary is that process for that person, and that's how things start to emerge. Everyone has a different way to do it.
Well, I mean, I agree that it's possible that for the speaker of this poem, that's a literal thing. I think it could also just be a metaphor for the nature of one's love relationship with language. You know,
Yeah,
the romantic partner here becomes the dictionary, and
yeah,
that's the mechanism through which the poem is constructed. It's through this adoring relationship to text, and then the text sort of builds its own body out of that loving orientation. I don't know that it's a singular. I don't know that I would read it as a recommendation necessarily. But
yeah, yeah.
you got to bring this to bed. If you want to be a poet, bring your
Yeah,
OED
make sure your
into.
partner isn't there. There's not enough room for the partner in the dictionary. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah, it's a different kind of dog, maybe.
yeah. Like I can see a New Yorker cartoon where someone gets pushed out of the bed and the dictionary has legs and arms. Yeah, finally, I got my own space.
Yeah, yeah, but I find that to be she's an unusual poet in many respects. She's a quasi surrealist. She's an interesting, very playful, very very playful poet. But thinking about her text reminded me of a poem of one of my own, which is also related to the linguistic texture and to the means by which we perceive that spark at the end of our darkness. I mean, the writing on the page, after all, is its own kind of darkness, and the meaning
Yeah,
we might think is the spark behind that darkness. And this is meditating on that very issue. It's a text entitled "Query on Typography." What is
Yeah.
the light inside the opening of every letter? White behind the angles, is a language bright because a curvature of space inside a line is visible? Is script a sign of what it does or does not occupy? Scripture the covenant of I and I with word, or what the word defines? Which is source and which is shrine? The light of body or the light behind? So I generally am disinclined to over articulate possible means of engagement with my own work, but I can say that I'm in that text. I'm attempting to scaffold a number of simultaneous meaning systems, or at least images that seem to signify in various simultaneous ways. But the beginning query has to do with the nature of typography. There is a strange relationship between positive and negative space in language, and what defines the shape of the letter appears to be what is not the letter. We recognize words, indeed letters, because of the nature of their difference, but their distinctions are made plain by the erasure that surrounds them. And then it seems clear then their meaning depends on what they are not, and their not being becomes the source of their individual significance. I know that's a little elaborated, but then, yeah, so what is it? Is it the light, that is the white space behind the language, that shines through to give our experience of language meaning? Is it the light of the body of the language that is flickering in us as we read and engage? What is the relationship between the visual and the sense of self? And finally, yeah, what is the source and what is the shrine? How do we understand that in spiritual terms, the relationship between our physicality and the structure of meaning? It seems to me that meaning is always metaphysical. In other words, it lives somewhere above and beyond the physical or literal substance of what we engage. A bird is a bird. What does a bird mean? Now we've entered into the realm of the spiritual, or the non-literal. The dictionary has, yes, denotative meanings, but when we talk about what things mean to us, what they mean in the world, when we imbue something with meaning, even in the nature of the dictionary, you have the word and then the word's referent. It's external point of signification. So
Yeah, it'd be nice to find out how typographers feel about the space behind the letter. Yeah, it'd be interesting how because I know uh, there's like a typography hall of fame or something. I don't know. There's some association, but occasionally some typography stories will appear in the New York Times or something or somewhere else. And, it's always intriguing how people come up with these new styles, or whatever you want to call it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they influence our experience of text so profoundly. Think of like the New Yorker. You pick up that, it's defined partly by the typography. That's its distinctive house style, and it engenders an aesthetic space that becomes
Yeah.
typical of a particular book that we read, a particular magazine, a particular newspaper, and it helps to curate the physicality of that space. So typography is it's the furniture in the room of meaning.
Mm, I like that. Furniture in the room of meaning. Yeah.
Well, maybe I don't know. Yeah, we go to 10:30. So then I became interested in thinking about disembodied experience. And maybe now I'll turn, as if for
Yeah.
the next three that I'm going to read, I want to read poems that seem to me to exemplify transcendence, which is part of how I associate that spark in the darkness. It's
Yeah.
a means of conquest, of overcoming, maybe we could say of hopefulness. of moving past the limits of what we can't see.
Yeah.
So this is I had the page marked, and now uh, I'm searching for it. This is a poem by a poet I really love. I don't think she's read enough. May Swenson. Are you familiar with May
Oh, May,
Swenson?
yeah, yeah. Didn't May Swenson have one about baseball or something? I don't know. May Swenson has some good stuff.
Yeah,
You're right.
she and she's it's funny because we know so many of her contemporaries so fully, and she cast quite a large shadow in the course of her own lifetime. But um, this is an uncouth narrative, but I'll share with you something I was really surprised to learn. I think she's one of the few people who ever accompanied Elizabeth Bishop in the act of actual urination. They were at Yaddo together, and Bishop was a little tipsy and couldn't figure out how to get in the bathroom, and so I think she just went, and there she was with May Swenson. But we definitely know a lot more about Bishop, it seems, on a daily basis, or hear more about her than we do about Swenson. I think Swenson really deserves a reconsideration and elevation in the contemporary moment.
Yeah, grew up in a Mormon family, oldest of 10. Yeah.
Yeah, out in Logan, Utah, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that right?
What's that?
Um,
Utah,
in
yeah.
Logan,
Yeah, she
Utah.
was,
It's not even Salt Lake. I mean, she was
yeah.
um, that's I think the site of Utah State University now. I
Yeah,
don't know
she
if it
was,
was.
yeah.
Um, but this is just a delicious, in my view, absolutely delicious poem called "Seated in a Plain." And here we have a moment of transcendence that seems to invite us to consider our situation above the terrestrial or the mundane, in the realm of the ethereal. But of course, it's physically embodied. I mean, it's a literal situation here, being on a plane, seated in a plane on a kicked up floor of cloud, a couch of cloud, deformed and fluffy. Far out, more celestial furniture, fat chairs slowly puffing forth their airy stuffing. On dream feet, I walked into that large parlor on cool pearl, but found it far between the restless resting places. Pinnacles, detaching, floating from their bases, swelled to turbulent beds and tables, ebbed to ebullient chairs, then footstools that, degraded, flowed with the floor before I could get there. One must be a cloud to occupy a house of cloud. I twirled in my dream and was deformed and reformed, making many faces, refusing the fixture of a solid soul. So came to a couch I could believe, although it altered its facile carvings, at each heave became another throne. Neither dissolved nor solid, I was settled and unsettled in my placeless chair. A voluntary mobile, many-bodied, I traded shape for the versatility of air.
Boy, I think, what did she have to drink before she got on the plane? I was going to say that chair was like navigating. No, no, just no. I've never heard someone like just go into the cloud universe like that.
It's
Really,
it's astounding. It might be, I don't want to historicize it too much, but
yeah,
this is from her book Half Sun, Half Sleep, which I think is 1967.
yeah,
So it probably was more I don't want to, I know 1967 was not the Middle Ages, but I suspect that commercial air travel at that time was a little more glamorous, for one thing, right? People would
yeah,
still get dressed up to get
yeah,
on an
yeah,
airplane, but also just less of less of an everydayness. I think now getting on an airplane, we would all lament the inhumane conditions
yeah,
which we find ourselves by virtue of shrunken seats
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
um, lesser service. But I love its lyricization of the opportunity to participate in a realm above the earthly realm and to
yeah,
trade embodied form for the versatility of air.
yeah,
It's a text that seems to me to be partly in conversation with not I think in a knowing way, but Mark Strand's lovely poem "Keeping Things Whole."
yeah.
Uh, uh, wherever I am what is missing is the resonant line in there. And the speaker of that poem is just a vacancy that moves through space. It is a kind of space that divides things from themselves, but then allows them to be reconfigured. Here, the speaker has made an exchange from embodied form to something of the less physical to maintain, I would say, not only a richer spiritual presence, but also perhaps a higher sense of separation from the concerns of the embodied. So, the pivot here is from being seated in a plane, that's a physical act, to becoming a sort of many-bodied cloud figure, moving from inside the plane to outside the plane, from being crouched in the position of a chair to being opened into the ethereal as a complete spiritual experience. But yeah, it's an intoxicated poem. The music is remarkable here, and the subtext of a kind of glorious celestial afterworld is also maybe. I mean, I don't know that she was a practicing Mormon, though I know she did come from that space. Well, that's one relationship to the dark, is to say, well, I'm just going to leave the world of our sufferings. You start with Ross Gay and the cold exteriority. He invites us to dig our toes in there. She seems to be turning away from the body overall, and moving us into the ethereal. One of my favorite poems of perhaps more earthly engagement and achievement of relief or resolution of sparking out of darkness is a poem by Philip Larkin entitled "The Trees." The trees are coming into leaf like something almost being said. The recent buds relax and spread. Their greenness is a kind of grief. Is it that they are born again and we grow old? No, they die too. Their yearly trick of looking new is written down in rings of grain. Yet still the unresting castles thresh in full-grown thickness every May. Last year is dead, they seem to say. Begin afresh, afresh, afresh.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's marvelous. But here we're moving not above or beyond the physical space. It's not a turn from the body to disembodiment. It's actually a turn from a perception of grief or an experience of sorrow, the mechanism of foretelling our own doom, into a restart, right? Begin afresh. Perceiving the natural world as an invitation for reinvention or courageous perpetuation, turning the page, as it were here.
Yeah.
This is a profound spark in the dark, to my mind, and the dialectic there is richly rewarding. I hear that poem in my mind more often than I might like to admit. Maybe on occasions where my subconscious mind is recognizing something I need to let live as I proceed through the world, more so than I might anticipate.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How would you instruct your students around this body disembodied? I mean, I'm just, once again, you don't have to give me the syllabus, but I'm just wondering, are there times in your teaching where you're having them really go out somewhere away from maybe some of I'm not going to say anything's really traditional, but maybe they want to swim in certain lanes, and you're saying, well, we're going to get out of this pool and take a journey, and we're going to be in a way other pool over here, and you may not even know what color the water is.
Well, if I understand your question correctly, I guess I would say that one of the touchstones that I use is a sort of an Aristotelian snippet, and that is in Aristotle's. So you have the sort of Platonic division between the imperfect world and the world of perfect forms, and this creates a sense of the earth and its materials as degraded.
Yeah.
Aristotle, slightly revises that and suggests that the universal exists for and shines through the particular. It's not necessarily that we live in a degraded space as much as we can ascertain the nature of the transcendent by virtue of the very tangible, mundane materials of our experience and our world.
Yeah.
And that universal shining through the particular is also the core principle of detailed literary writing. In the specificity of your experience, John, as it's rendered on the page, I encounter some overlap in the Venn diagrams of you and me with my own experience.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
find more about myself in the nature of the unique drama that is grounded in your details. And so often what I see is maybe the students they get too concerned with trying to jump into the disembodied space and foregoing the grounded particularity, which is the
Right.
platform on which all that stuff rests, or they forget that they have a responsibility to at least let the worldly serve as the flower pot for all of
Yeah.
the air above
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
so those are the two things that I try to cultivate. I say, you're sort of hedging your bets here, and what you wind up with is a poem that's just a ham sandwich. But I want this to be like the ham sandwich that leads us up, or
Yeah.
the ham sandwich that leads us into our own mouths. It's got to kind of
Yeah.
fetishize the
Yeah.
physical or ground us in something otherwise. And if it's too uncertain,
Yeah.
that you kind of wind up in this flat middle space. So I'm
And how
not.
many kids do you usually, yeah, how many kids do you usually have in a class?
It depends on the class. So, I mean, some
Yeah.
classes are designed to have higher capacity. So if I'm teaching a
Yeah.
lower division literature course where we're just reading, that can be as many as 32 students. If I'm teaching a seminar, driven by the art of creative writing, then this semester I've got 8 students in my creative writing class. I think
Nice.
go up to 15, but it's more usually between 8 and 12. Um,
Nice. Nice. Nice.
yeah, it's a one of the challenges about teaching in general is that students come into the room for a variety of reasons. What makes it's an art class, so we have to focus on technique in part,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's not easy to see, especially as an undergraduate, what makes the thing you love what it is. You just see your love more than you can even see the thing that you love often.
Yeah.
I mean, this is true
Yeah.
of early romance, isn't it? Like, I just know that I want to be around you. I'm not really sure what you like or who you are, but
Yeah.
my experience of attraction is overshadowing something in the
Yeah.
nature of actual creatureliness. Um, and I think that can be true. I mean, this is something that Eliot acknowledges, where great poems can communicate before they are understood, he says. I think that's right on the money. And I think sometimes what transfixes us is something mysterious in the nature of what we've encountered. We have a strange experience. Something is being pressed in us or being reconfigured, and we don't have the verbiage to articulate it. We may just have the feeling of that. My wife is also a writer, and she describes in her early adolescence this accidental experience in a local library where she pulled down a book of poems. And yeah, she said she had this strange, it was unlike anything that had ever happened to her before. She didn't know what the hell it was. She didn't really understand what it was. She just knew she wanted to have that experience again. And that really opened her to a complete lifetime in literature. So a lot of students are kind of at that level. I mean, I'm not saying they aren't smart, they're brilliant kids, but it takes a while to begin to learn how to see what is happening and then to talk about how what is happening is translating into your experience.
Yeah.
Those are different
Yeah.
phases. And so, there are students who are at various levels in that journey of articulation, and then there are others who just who are just there to have a good time, and they want to enjoy writing. They want to enjoy that process, and it is one of the great pleasures
Yeah.
of conscious life, is becoming engrossed in the act of making. I read not that long ago, well, not at this point, a couple of years ago, a book by a quantum physicist named Carlo Rovelli. It's about time. This is to me, one of the great mysteries of existence. Like, what the hell is this thing? Nobody can tell us what it is. It doesn't appear, according to Carlo Rovelli, there's no evidence in the physical universe that time actually exists in that linear way that we experience it outside of entropy. That is the only thing that has
Yeah.
a directional tendency in the realm of physics. And his ultimate hypothesis is that our experience of time is embodied time. It's like it's a biological thing. We're
Yeah.
creatures of the mortal coil, and as a result, we quiver with our experience of temporality, but that it's not as real in the universe as it seems to us. And I've started to think more about how relative my own experience of time is. And, when I'm writing, when I'm really writing well, when I'm reading something I love, when I love hiking, when I'm out, I'm engrossed, so I swim in the pool. That's not necessarily a transcendent experience, but there's some sense of disappearance in these acts of our utmost concentration, where we are relieved of the burdens of our temporality, and we participate in what I might describe as a kind of time eternal. It's a stillness, it's just like present, prominent nowishness that erases all peripheral concerns. And that is a great reason for students to be in the classroom. But those students are not necessarily thinking about how they can structure their texts, to get to the transcendental, or how you know what I mean? They just want to get on the surfboard and have a miraculous time. And that's good by me. I mean, it's certainly not a religious experience of any definitive kind, but there's an analogy there between having the kind of awe-inspiring experience of watching the sunrise, or listening to the ocean, or getting next to an enormous mountain, just being contained inside of your own unfolding discovery. That's a unique kind of magic. So there are a variety
of
ways.
great. No, thanks for sharing that. No, I'm always interested in when we have poets on that are teaching students and their approach and how the students react to it. So
we have to surprise ourselves. That's a big part, not just in the classroom, but as writers. If we're not writing in the direction of something we don't fully understand, then that magical action, the transmission, I think Harriet Mullet is helping us to perceive, where the writer is kind of seeing something for the first time or delighting in something, that record of discovery. That's really what the poems that I love the most. That's what they seem to reproduce in me, is the absolute unprecedented arrival that took place in the hands of the writer in the course of writing.
Nice. I like that, arrival in the hands of the writer. Yeah.
So maybe the last thing I'll read. Yeah, I couldn't remember, John, if I in one prior appearance, I might have invited William Butler Yeats into the room.
That's always a good thing. That's a good guy to have in the room. Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of my touchstone poets for sure. And I'll read the whole text. It's a little long, but this is a poem of his from The Winding Stair and other poems, entitled A Dialogue of Self and Soul. And this is maybe the last resting point on these kind of dialectical journeys that are always their own versions of the darkness and the spark within it. If we start with Rusquet, moving from the possibility of grief or anxiety to gratitude, Harriet Mullen, who is moving from a kind of fetishistic relationship to the language to some kind of sense of its magic, its profound possibility to provide insight. Maybe, I won't include myself in the discussion. These poems of transcendence. Yeats moves from Larkin's maybe midpoint between the sky and the dirt, and really grounds us in the miracle of what is. And I think in this way we've kind of come full circle back in some way to the Rusquet position. But he's explicitly, the speaker of this poem is explicitly thematizing the relationship between the selfhood and a soul. Maybe one thing I'll say about it, since it is a slightly longer text, is that Montashigi is the name of the individual whose family made this sword that the speaker is holding in his lap. So, John, I hope this isn't tedious. It's really section 2 that I want to emphasize, but I'm going to read the whole thing because I love all of it. This is a dialogue of self and soul, and I'll read the tags, which indicate that it's myself speaking or my soul speaking. So here we have a real dialectic, the most literal kind. My soul. I summon to the winding ancient stair. Set all your mind upon the steep ascent, upon the broken, crumbling battlement, upon the breathless, starlit air, upon the star that marks the hidden pole. Fix every wandering thought upon that quarter where all thought is done. Who can distinguish darkness from the soul? Myself. The consecrated blade upon my knees is Sado's ancient blade, still as it was, still razor keen, still like a looking glass, unspotted by the centuries. That flowering, silken old embroidery, torn from some court lady's dress and round the wooden scabbard bound and wound, can, tattered, still protect, faded, adorn my soul. Why should the imagination of a man long past his prime remember things that are emblematical of love and war? Think of ancestral night that can, if but imagination scorn the earth and intellect its wandering to this and that and the other thing, deliver from the crime of death and birth. Myself. Monteshigi, third of his family, fashioned it 500 years ago. About it lie flowers from I know not what embroidery, heart's purple. And all these I set for emblems of the day against the tower, emblematical of the night, and claim as by a soldier's right, a charter to commit the crime once more. My soul. Such fullness in that quarter overflows and falls into the basin of the mind that man is stricken deaf and dumb and blind, for intellect no longer knows, is the ought or knower from the known. That is to say, ascends to heaven. Only the dead can be forgiven. But when I think of that, my tongue's a stone. This is second section, all spoken by the self after this dialogue. A living man is blind and drinks his drop. What matter if the ditches are impure? What matter if I live it all once more? Endure that toil of growing up, the ignominy of boyhood, the distress of boyhood changing into man, the unfinished man and his pain brought face to face with his own clumsiness. The finished man among his enemies? How in the name of heaven can he escape that defiling and disfigured shape the mirror of malicious eyes casts upon his eyes, until at last he thinks that shape must be his shape? And what's the good of an escape if honor find him in the wintry blast? I am content to live it all again, and yet again, if it be life to pitch into the frog spawn of a blind man's ditch, a blind man battering blind men, or into that most fecund ditch of all, the folly that man does or must suffer if he woos a proud woman not kindred of his soul. I am content to follow to its source every event in action or in thought, measure the lot, forgive myself the lot. When such as I cast out remorse, so great a sweetness flows into the breast. We must laugh and we must sing. We are blessed by everything. Everything we look upon is blessed. Well, that's really, as opposed to some kind of transcendental motion, which is maybe in section 1 of the poem as an opportunity, different maybe from Philip Larkin's moving directly from the earthly into the hopeful or the new, into the spark. This is driving right into the material of earth and celebrating its inherent blessedness. Our fortune in our. Yeah. I just find that to be. That is a spark of some profundity inexhaustible and hopefulness ever sustaining. And so these are the things that poems give us in our darkness, assuming that that's the theme. I don't know how other people have handled their relationship to sparks in the dark, John.
Yeah, I think part of it is it's it's hard to say. I think people have played off it in different ways. I don't know if there's one, like 5 people are always doing it this way. I think everyone just kind of, is using it as how do I interpret that with what, they've authored or what other, poets have done. I'm trying to think. Yeah, we did. I'm trying to think. It's been a couple of weeks. So one of the last ones we did was the one poem, 2 poets thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think everyone just takes it as, really it's just like guidance. It's just like kind of say is instead of looking out in the baseball field and there's left field, center field, right field, maybe this is a little bit left center. If you could
Yep.
just think about that. So so we've got about another couple minutes. I didn't know if you wanted to share one more poem, but no, don't feel you have to.
Yeah, well, yeah, I will be delighted to do that. I'm going to read Hard to Outdo Yeats. This is a poem by A.R. Ammons, and this is called In View of the Fact. I love A.R. Ammons. I think he's a really companionable voice.
Yeah, I
And
might ask you if you could send me your list that you read today, because I'd like to get that up on LinkedIn or something. I just think it's very
yeah,
intriguing for people. Yeah.
yeah, I'll be happy to. This is In View of the Fact. The people of my time are passing away. My wife is baking for a funeral, a 60-year-old who died suddenly when the phone rings, and it's Ruth we care so much about in intensive care. It was once weddings that came so thick and fast, and then first babies, such a hullabaloo. Now it's this, that, and the other, and somebody else gone or on the brink. Well, we never thought we would live forever, although we did. And now it looks like we won't. Some of us are losing a leg to diabetes. Some don't know what they went downstairs for. Some know that a hired watchful person is around. Some like to touch the cane tip into something steady. So nice. We have already lost so many, brushed the loss of ourselves. Our address books for so long, a slow scramble. Now our palimpsests, scribbles and scratches. Our index cards for Christmases, birthdays, Halloweens drop clean away into sympathies. At the same time, we are getting used to so many leaving. We are hanging on with a grip to the ones left. We are not giving up on the congestive heart failure or brain tumors, on the nice old men left in empty houses, or on the widows who decide to travel a lot. We think the sun may shine someday when we'll drink wine together and think of what used to be. Until we die, we will remember every single thing, recall every word, love every loss. Then we will, as we must, leave it to others to love. Love that can grow brighter and deeper till the very end, gaining strength and getting more precious all the way.
Welcome to my world, my 55 plus community. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
isn't that a remarkable poem to
Yeah, it
take?
is. I felt like I was getting a chronology of part of life here. Yeah, yeah. This, a couple of our yeah, a couple of our neighbors are sick. My brother's sick. Some friends are. Yeah, part of it is when you're in your 70s. I'm 73. My wife's 71. Is your whole generation of friends and stuff are in this. I call it nether of
Mm,
well, not well, want to be well. Yeah, it's a. I don't know how my grandmothers did it. I think when they were 65, they looked 95. That was back in the 50s. But
right.
yeah, just no, it's aging is hey, managing health is a full-time job. That's all I got to say is I've got all sorts of stuff I got to do. I got to do exercise. I got to take medicine, just doctor appointments. Yeah, just yeah, it's yeah.
But
But that was
John,
great. I got to get a copy of that poem. I got to get it and share it with some people. They're like,
of
"Oh, you're talking
course.
about Highland Green."
But I'll ask you, since you are in the midst of that experience, do you share the sense of the speaker of that poem? That, well, I'll frame it this way. I'm aware of how much invisibility my experience of body it maintains when it's working well. You don't see it. Like just walking around, no problem.
Yeah,
I don't think about my hip unless my hip is sore, right? It's just my hip.
yeah.
It's disappeared into the structure of my will until it emerges as a broken thing, or an impingement on my otherwise unconscious relationship. And then it becomes more precious to me when I become aware of it. I want to, like, I'm more grateful for the time I had with it when I realize it's not working
Yeah.
well. I want it to be better, more so than I cared for its fortune when I wasn't paying attention to it. I think there's something of that in the Ammons poem, that love is more precious the more you become aware of what a rarity it is. that when you're just distributing it freely, like you got an emotional billionaire, you're just handing it out. It's charity.
Yeah.
It's nothing. And those dollars, they mean little. But when you have just a few left, each one has so much profundity and power in it. I mean, do you share that sense, or is
Well,
this
I think everyone here, I think there's 230 people, or maybe 300 people in 220 houses. So most people, like everybody's got an issue, a med issue. You know
Mhm.
about it or you don't know about it. I've got a few. I just that this is the first homogenous community we've lived in
Wow.
of people of this age. When we lived in DC, or even in Stockbridge, we were next to people who were 10 years older than us. We were in our 60s. So, there were 70-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds, the
Mhm.
whole thing. There was always a mixed age group of people. And even when we lived in DC, it was also, age and, diversity. So part of it is initially it's kind of a shock of all these people and we ride people to the hospital or we ride people to a doctor appointment. It's yeah, the unadvertised part of aging.
Man.
But listen, we have to sign off.
All right.
No, but listen, thank you so much. You make me want to study poetry in a different way. No, because your word usage is amazing. I love it. I love it.
I appreciate that, John. Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I wish you well. I hope you get well soon.
I
With all.
will. I will. And please send me the poetry list because I want to put something out on LinkedIn
Okay.
and also promote you and stuff like that. So yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I'll send you a
and I
note.
look forward to your new book. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks
Take
again.
care.
Happy holidays.
You too.
All right, Rosemary. Let's see if she's going to stop the recording. Okay. Okay. Guess we will stop it.